The Moran scout fleet glided through the darkness of space. Their ships gleamed like silver fish in a black ocean. Admiral Gill stood on the bridge of the command ship, watching the stars. The Mirans had ruled the Galactic Concordat for centuries. No species matched their technology or wisdom. "Admiral, sensors detect an unknown object," reported Officer Sue, her eyes widening at her display. Jill moved to her station with practiced grace. "Show me." The screen revealed a massive vessel unlike anything in their records. It was angular and dark, with sections that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange protrusions lined its hull like sleeping weapons. "Size comparison?" Gill asked quietly. "3 times larger than our command ship, Admiral," Sue replied. "Power readings are inconsistent. Some systems appear primitive, while others—" She shook her head. "Some readings make no sense at all." Jill narrowed his eyes. "Hail them." Commander Ta stepped forward, adjusting his formal collar. The Mirans prided themselves on proper protocol during first contacts. Opening communications. The large view screen remained dark for several moments. Gill wondered if the strange ship even understood their transmission protocols. Then the screen flickered to life. The being that appeared looked surprisingly similar to Mirans. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, but with strange, flat features and oddly colored skin. It wore a dark uniform with unfamiliar symbols. "Unknown vessel, this is Commander Ta of the Moran Concordat. You have entered regulated space. Prepare for integration assessment." The alien's expression remained unchanged. After a pause that seemed deliberate, it responded in perfect galactic standard. "This is Captain Kim of the United Earth ship Invictus. We acknowledge your greeting but not your authority. We are on a peaceful mission of exploration." A ripple of surprise moved through the bridge. Officer Sue leaned toward Gill. "Admiral, they're speaking standard without a translation matrix. They've been studying us." Gill nodded slightly. This was unexpected. "Can you detect any weapon systems?" "Yes, but—" Sue frowned at her console. "The configurations are unusual. Some appear to be projectile-based. Others, I'm not sure." Ta had continued the exchange. "Captain Kim, all vessels in Concordat space must submit to classification and registration. Your ship appears to be a military vessel. This requires special processing." The human's expression changed slightly, a tightening around the eyes. "The Invictus is indeed a warship, but our mission is peaceful. We seek knowledge, not conflict." Gill stepped forward. "Captain Kim, I am Admiral Gill of the Moran fleet. Your vessel's technology presents several anomalies. We request permission to send a small team to your ship for standard assessment." "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Admiral," Kim replied. "Earth protocol forbids unknown boarding parties. We would be happy to meet at a neutral location to exchange information." A slight smile crossed Gill's face. These humans were cautious, smart. Unfortunately, Concordat law is clear. Unregistered military vessels must submit to immediate inspection or leave Concordat space. Kim's face remained calm, but Gill noticed the human's posture straighten. "We understand. However, we must decline. The Invictus will withdraw from your territory." "That is no longer an option," Gill responded, making a subtle gesture to his weapons officer. "Your vessel's technology requires proper documentation. Please power down your engines and prepare for boarding." 3 Moran ships moved to surround the human vessel. Standard procedure for containing new species who didn't understand their place in the galactic order. Kim's expression didn't change. "Admiral, we have no hostile intentions, but we will defend ourselves if necessary." "Your cooperation is appreciated but not required," Gill replied. "Your vessel is surrounded. Resistance would be unwise." For a moment, the bridge was silent. Then Captain Kim nodded to someone off-screen. "Very well, Admiral. We will comply." The transmission ended. Gill turned to his tactical officer. "Status of the human vessel. They appear to be powering down, Admiral. Engine signatures are decreasing. Gil nodded with satisfaction. Another species learning their place in the Concordat. Prepare the boarding team. Full defensive measures. We don't know. Admiral. Officer Sue's voice cut through his orders. Energy spike from the human ship. The view screen showed the Invictus suddenly glowing with a strange blue light that pulsed across its hull. Weapons, Gil demanded. No, it's the engines, but the signature doesn't match anything in our database. The massive human ship began to move, slowly at first, then with increasing speed directly toward one of the Miran vessels. They're going to ram us, shouted the tactical officer. Gil's mind raced. The humans couldn't be this foolish. Evasive maneuvers, all ships. But instead of collision, something impossible happened. The space around the Invictus seemed to bend and distort. Light twisted around the hull, creating a rippling effect that hurt to look at directly. What is happening? Gil demanded. Then, in a flash of blue-white light, the human warship vanished. Stunned silence filled the bridge. The tactical display showed nothing where the massive vessel had been moments before. Find them, Gil ordered. They must have cloaking technology. Officers scrambled at their stations. Minutes passed with no results. Admiral, Sue finally said, they're gone. Completely gone. No energy signature, no radiation trail, nothing. Impossible, Gil whispered. No ship that size could disappear without a trace. But the evidence was clear. The human warship had somehow broken the laws of physics as the Mirans understood them. That evening, the Concordat Council met in emergency session. The recording from the Miran fleet played before the gathered representatives of 100 worlds. As the human ship vanished from existence, murmurs filled the chamber. High Counselor Jo rose from her seat. For the first time in 3 centuries, we face a species with technology we cannot explain. These humans possess capabilities beyond our understanding. She looked around the chamber gravely. I hereby declare humans a Class 1 investigation priority. All Concordat forces are to locate and assess this potential threat. We must determine if these humans are friends, enemies, or something else entirely. As the council adjourned, Admiral Gil stood alone, replaying the moment of the Invictus's impossible departure. In all his years of service, he had never seen anything like it. The humans had not just rejected Concordat authority, they had proven it meaningless, and that frightened him more than any weapon could. Admiral Han stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dawn Seeker. His eyes were fixed on the star map that filled the main screen. Small red dots marked places where humans had been spotted in the past 3 months. The pattern made no sense. They appear and disappear without logic. Han said to his second-in-command, Officer Lee, no species should be able to travel like this. Lee nodded. The High Council chose well when they assigned you to this hunt, Admiral. Han was known throughout the Concordat as a tracker without equal. For 30 years, he had pursued pirates, smugglers, and rebels across the galaxy. He had never failed to catch his target. Until now. The humans are different, Han said quietly. They don't think like us. Han had spent weeks studying the Invictus incident. He reviewed the sensor logs and crew reports countless times. There was something about the human ship that bothered him. It was both advanced and outdated, powerful yet inefficient, as if it had been built by multiple civilizations with different levels of technology. His personal communication device chimed. Admiral Han, he answered. Admiral, the Council requests your presence immediately, said the voice of High Counselor Min. New information has arrived. The Council chamber was a large round room with seats for all 100 species of the Concordat. Today, only the High Council of 12 was present, their faces serious in the dim light. Admiral Han greeted High Counselor Min. We have received this footage from a trading outpost in Sector 47. The room darkened, and a hologram appeared in the center. It showed a civilian transport ship under attack by 3 smaller vessels. Pirates, Han recognized from their attack pattern. The transport was damaged, leaking air from its side. The pirates fired again, targeting the engines. Then something unexpected happened. A blue flash filled the screen, and there it was, the Invictus. The human warship appeared between the transport and the pirates, massive and dark against the stars. They used their disappearing technology to get there instantly, Han observed. Impressive. The hologram showed the human ship broadcasting on all frequencies. The message was simple. This is Captain Kim of the UES Invictus. Cease your attack and surrender. The pirates responded by firing all weapons at the Invictus. Their shots seemed to hit an invisible wall around the human ship, flaring blue on impact. Defensive shields, muttered Counselor Min. Very advanced ones. What happened next made even Han's breath catch. The Invictus fired once, just once, at each pirate vessel. 3 precise beams of light. 3 explosions, each perfectly centered on the pirates' engine sections. They disabled them without destroying them, Han noted. Precise work. 2 pirate ships surrendered immediately. The third tried to run. The Invictus fired again, this time cutting through the fleeing ship's weapon systems with surgical precision. The hologram ended, and the lights returned to normal. We have testimony from the transport captain, said Counselor Min. He claims the humans boarded the disabled pirate vessels, captured the crews, and delivered them to the nearest Concordat outpost before disappearing again. They understand our laws, Han said thoughtfully, and they choose to follow them, even though they don't recognize our authority. The question, Admiral, is what do we do about them? Asked another counselor. Are they a threat or a potential ally? Han considered before speaking. I need to meet them, talk to them. Only then can I judge their intentions. Then find them, Admiral, ordered Min. Find this Invictus and its captain. For 2 months, Han chased whispers and rumors. The human ship appeared to help a colony dealing with a disease outbreak. It was spotted near an ancient ruin site. It rescued a scientific expedition, trapped on a dying planet. Each time, the Invictus vanished before Han could reach it. They're studying us, Han told his crew one evening, learning our strengths and weaknesses. Why? Asked Officer Lee. That's what I intend to find out. Then came the break Han needed. Long-range sensors detected a strange energy signature in the Crescent asteroid field, the same signature the Invictus produced before disappearing. They're there, Han said, studying the readings, hiding among the asteroids. The field was dangerous, thousands of massive rocks spinning and colliding in unpredictable patterns. Most ships avoided it entirely. Prepare the fleet, Han ordered. We'll surround the field and close in slowly. 5 Moran warships moved into position, their sensors scanning every asteroid. For hours, they found nothing. Then a small contact appeared on Han's display. There, he pointed, behind that large asteroid. The Dawn Seeker moved forward carefully. Han ordered all weapons ready but not aimed. He wanted to talk, not fight. As they rounded the asteroid, Han finally saw his quarry. The Invictus floated silently in space, its dark hull making it nearly invisible against the blackness. Open communications, Han ordered. Before his officer could comply, a message came through. Admiral Han, said the now familiar voice of Captain Kim. I was wondering when you would find us. Han felt a chill. They had known he was hunting them. Captain Kim, Han replied calmly. You've led me on quite a chase. It wasn't personal, Admiral. We needed time to understand your Concordat. Han nodded to himself. And what have you learned? That you're not as united as you pretend to be. That some species in your Concordat are treated as lesser beings. That your peace comes at the cost of freedom. Han frowned. These were dangerous observations. True, but dangerous. I would like to meet in person, Captain, Han said. There was a pause. I accept. 1 ship, Admiral. Yours alone. Han agreed. As the rest of his fleet held position, The Dawn Seeker moved forward to dock with the Invictus. Just as Han prepared to board, Officer Lee grabbed his arm. "Admiral, it's a trap. The human ship is powering up its engines." Han watched in disbelief as the Invictus suddenly accelerated, weaving through asteroids with impossible precision. His own ship tried to follow but couldn't match the human vessel's maneuverability. "They're toying with us," Han realized. For an hour, the Invictus led them through the asteroid field, always just out of weapons range, anticipating every move Han made. It was as if they could read his mind, responding to his tactics before he even executed them. Finally, Han ordered his ship to stop. On the view screen, the Invictus also paused. "Captain Kim," Han called, "what is the purpose of this game?" Kim's voice came back clear. "Not a game, Admiral. A demonstration. You can't catch what you don't understand." With that, the human warship glowed blue and vanished once more. Han stood silently on his bridge, a new respect forming for his elusive opponent. For the first time in his career, he had met someone he couldn't outthink. "What now, Admiral?" asked Officer Lee. Han turned from the view screen. "Now we change our approach. If we can't hunt them, perhaps we can interest them enough that they'll come to us." The neutral station floated in empty space between Concordat territory and unclaimed stars. It was an old trading post with faded markings and dim lights. Admiral Han arrived first, bringing only a small security team. He chose this place carefully. No advantages for either side. Han waited in the station's main conference room. The walls were bare metal, and the table was simple plastic. The perfect place for enemies to meet and perhaps become something else. The station's manager entered, nervous. "Admiral, the human ship has arrived." Han nodded. "Allow them to dock." Minutes later, the door slid open. Captain Kim entered first, followed by two officers. Han studied the human captain carefully. Kim was shorter than Han expected, with short black hair and alert eyes that missed nothing. The captain wore a simple dark uniform with silver markings on the collar. "Captain Kim," Han said, standing. "Welcome." "Admiral Han," Kim replied with a slight nod. "Your pursuit was impressive. Few have tracked us for so long." Han gestured to the table. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." The humans took their seats across from the Miran officers. For a moment, neither spoke, each measuring the other. "Why have you been observing Concordat space?" Han finally asked. Kim's expression remained neutral. "The same reason you explore, to learn. Humans are curious by nature." "And secretive," Han added. "You've been watching us for years without making contact." "We needed to understand what we were dealing with," Kim replied. "The galaxy is full of dangers." Han leaned forward. "Tell me about humans. Where do you come from?" For the next hour, Kim spoke about Earth. Han listened with growing amazement. The human homeworld sounded nightmarish. Higher gravity than most habitable planets, wild temperature swings from freezing to burning, catastrophic weather events, and thousands of predator species. "Our ancestors evolved to survive these conditions," Kim explained. "It made us adaptable and warlike," Han suggested. Kim smiled slightly. "We've had our share of conflicts, but we've learned from them." "The Invictus is clearly a vessel designed for war," Han observed. "For defense," Kim corrected. "And yes, for war when necessary. But it's actually one of our mid-sized vessels." Han couldn't hide his surprise. "There are larger human ships." "Many," Kim replied simply. "Our home system is heavily defended." Han processed this information carefully. A species from a death world with advanced technology and a substantial military force. The implications were concerning. "Why haven't you joined the Concordat?" Han asked. "We could offer protection, trade, cultural exchange." Kim's expression hardened slightly. "We've observed how your Concordat functions, Admiral. Your species' classification system troubles us deeply." "Classification is necessary for order," Han replied. Each species contributes according to its abilities, and those deemed lesser have no voice in decisions that affect them. Kim said, "That contradicts our core values. All sentient beings deserve equal respect and rights." Han was about to respond when an alarm sounded. Both humans and Mirans tensed. The station manager rushed in. "Admiral, emergency transmission from Concordat Command." A screen on the wall activated, showing a frantic Miran officer. "This is an emergency broadcast to all Concordat vessels. Colony New Dawn is under attack by unknown forces. Massive casualties reported. All available ships respond immediately." The transmission showed brief footage of strange crystalline ships firing on a planet. Buildings collapsed. People ran screaming. "New Dawn is only 2 light jumps from here," Han said, already rising. "My ship will respond." "What are those attackers?" Kim asked. "Unknown," Han replied grimly. "I've never seen ships like that." Captain Kim exchanged looks with the other humans. "Admiral, the Invictus can reach New Dawn in 40 minutes at maximum speed. We offer our assistance." Han hesitated. Concordat protocols forbade military cooperation with unregistered species, but those people needed help now. "My superiors will not approve," Han said slowly. "Then don't ask them," Kim replied. "Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking rules." Han made his decision. "Very well. We go together." Both commanders rushed to their ships. As the Dawn Seeker prepared for departure, Han watched through the viewport as the Invictus undocked. His communication officer called out, "Admiral, Captain Kim is hailing us." "On screen," Han ordered. Kim appeared, now seated in a command chair. Behind the human, Han could see a bridge unlike any Miran design. Curved walls with floating display screens and officers working at stations with no visible controls. "Admiral, we'll reach New Dawn first," Kim said. "We'll assess the situation and send you tactical data." "Understood," Han replied. "But Captain, don't engage without us. These attackers are unknown. We should coordinate." Kim nodded. "We'll try to buy time until you arrive." The communication ended. Han watched in amazement as the Invictus began to glow with that now familiar blue light. Then it stretched impossibly, becoming a streak of light that vanished instantly. "That's not normal space travel," muttered Han's science officer. "They're bending reality somehow." "Follow them," Han ordered. "Maximum speed." When the Dawn Seeker arrived at New Dawn 40 minutes later, Han was prepared for the worst. The colony was home to nearly 1 million people, mostly civilians. What he wasn't prepared for was the sight of the Invictus in battle. The human warship was engaged with 3 crystalline vessels, each twice its size. The alien ships fired green energy beams that seemed to eat through matter itself. But the Invictus was changing. Sections of its hull that had appeared smooth and solid were opening, revealing weapon systems of incredible complexity. The ship's very shape seemed fluid, adapting to the battle as it fought. "Magnify," Han ordered, not believing his eyes. The view screen zoomed in on the Invictus. Panels along its side retracted, and massive cannons emerged. Other sections transformed into what appeared to be energy shields, intercepting the green beams. "It's like the ship is alive," whispered Han's tactical officer. The Invictus fired its main weapons, not energy beams like most advanced species used, but some kind of physical projectiles that moved at incredible speeds. When they struck one of the crystalline ships, the impact was devastating. Cracks spread across the alien vessel's surface before it exploded in a shower of fragments. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the planet," reported his communications officer. "It's a human ground team. They've evacuated hundreds of colonists to underground shelters." Han realized Captain Kim must have sent teams to the surface immediately upon arrival. While the Invictus engaged the attackers in space, human soldiers were saving lives on the ground. "Captain Kim is hailing us," the officer added. Kim's face appeared on screen. The human bridge was dimly lit, filled with smoke. An officer behind Kim was bleeding from a head wound. "Admiral, we've identified the attackers," Kim said, voice tight. "They call themselves the Nox. They're silicon-based life forms that feed on energy. They're here to drain the colony's power plants and the life force of its people." Han saw a new respect in Kim's eyes, not just as a skilled opponent from their earlier chase, but as a potential ally in a fight that mattered. "We've damaged one of their ships," Kim continued, "but there are more coming. We need to coordinate our defense. These Nox, they're like nothing we've encountered before." Han straightened in his chair. "Send us your tactical data." The Dawn Seeker stands ready to fight alongside the Invictus. For the first time, Kim smiled, a genuine expression that transformed the human's face. "Then let's show these Nox what happens when they threaten innocent lives." Han turned to his crew. "Battle stations. Today we fight with a new ally." The sky above New Horizon burned with the light of battle. Admiral Han watched from the bridge of the Dawn Seeker as 3 more Nox ships emerged from the darkness of space. Their crystalline structures glinted like jagged teeth against the stars. "Status report," Han demanded, his voice steady despite the situation. "Our main weapons are at 30% power," Officer Lee replied. "Hull integrity failing on decks 4 through 7. The colony's southern district is completely overrun." Han studied the tactical display. The Invictus hovered protectively over the colony's northern section, where most survivors had gathered. The human warship showed significant damage. Black scorch marks covered its hull, and one engine emitted an unstable blue glow. "Admiral, Captain Kim is requesting a private channel," said the communications officer. Han nodded. "Put it through to my station." Kim's face appeared on the small screen. The human looked exhausted, with a cut across one cheek and eyes reddened by smoke, but there was determination in that gaze that Han had come to respect. "Admiral, the situation is deteriorating," Kim said without preamble. "We've analyzed the Nox attack pattern. They're targeting energy sources, first the power plants, then living beings." "Our weapons are barely affecting their ships," Han replied. "Their crystalline structure seems to absorb energy attacks." Kim nodded. "We've noticed the same, but we may have an option." The human captain paused. "We have an experimental system. We call it Sunfire Protocol. It's never been field tested." "What does it do?" Han asked. "It creates a contained fusion reaction. Similar to what happens inside a star. The energy release is significant." Han understood immediately. That could destroy the entire colony, not just the Nox. "Not if properly controlled," Kim countered. "But we'd need to get the remaining civilians to a safe distance first. And," the human hesitated, "we'd need your ship to help protect the evacuation. The Invictus would be vulnerable while preparing the Sunfire system." Han considered his options. Concordat reinforcements were weeks away. Every minute meant more lives lost to the Nox. "We'll cover you," Han decided. "What do you need us to do?" The plan formed quickly. Human shuttles would evacuate the remaining colonists to caves in the northern mountains. The Dawn Seeker would provide defense against Nox ground forces, while the Invictus prepared its weapon. Han watched in amazement as human teams descended to the colony surface. Unlike Moran soldiers, who relied on technology and careful planning, the humans seemed to adapt instantly to changing conditions. "Admiral, you need to see this," said Officer Lee, bringing up footage from the ground. A group of human engineers had taken over a mining facility. With incredible speed, they were converting drilling equipment into defensive turrets. Others were reinforcing buildings with scavenged materials, creating a defensible perimeter around the evacuation zone. "How are they doing this so quickly?" Han wondered aloud. "Their captain told me humans evolved as tool users," Lee replied. "They can repurpose almost anything into something useful." More footage showed human soldiers engaging Nox ground forces. The silicon creatures moved like liquid crystal, fast and deadly. They fired energy weapons that could drain a Miran to a husk in seconds. Yet the humans fought with shocking effectiveness. When a human soldier was injured by a Nox weapon, instead of falling, they often continued fighting. One female soldier, her arm severely burned, simply switched her weapon to her other hand and kept firing. "Their physical resilience is remarkable," Han murmured. "What would kill our soldiers merely slows them down." Over the next hours, the evacuation proceeded. The Dawn Seekers' weapons provided cover, destroying Nox ground forces that approached the perimeter. But for every Nox they destroyed, two more seemed to appear. Then disaster struck. A massive Nox ship, larger than any they'd seen before, emerged from behind New Horizons' moon. It fired immediately, its green beam cutting through space toward the evacuee shuttles. "Intercept," Han commanded, but the Dawn Seeker was too far away. The beam never reached its target. The Invictus moved with impossible speed, positioning itself directly in the beam's path. The human ship shields flared brilliant blue under the assault. "Captain Kim, move your vessel," Han shouted over the comm. "Your shields can't sustain that attack." "The evacuation isn't complete," Kim's strained voice replied. "We need 3 more minutes." Han watched in horror as sections of the Invictus's shields began to fail. The Nox beam ate through one area, then another. The human ship was sacrificing itself to save the colonists. "All weapons, target that Nox ship," Han ordered. The Dawn Seeker fired everything it had, but the massive crystalline vessel seemed barely affected. The Nox beam continued its assault on the Invictus. "Admiral," Kim's voice came through, calm despite everything. "We're activating Sunfire now. Get your ship to these coordinates. There's a mineral deposit in the planet's crust that should provide shielding." "What about the Invictus?" Han demanded. A small smile crossed Kim's face. "We'll be fine. Probably." Han hesitated, then gave the order. The Dawn Seeker moved to the position Kim had indicated, taking shelter behind a massive ridge of dense metal ore. Through the view screen, Han saw the Invictus begin to glow. Not the usual blue of its engines, but a yellow-white light that grew more intense by the second. The glow spread from the center of the ship outward, becoming so bright that the view screen automatically darkened to protect the crew's eyes. "Energy readings off the scale," reported the science officer in awe. "They're creating a fusion reaction, like a miniature sun." The light from the Invictus suddenly pulsed outward in a perfect sphere. Where it touched the Nox ships, they didn't explode. They simply dissolved, their crystalline structures breaking down at the molecular level. The artificial sun expanded, covering the battlefield in brilliant light. The Nox ground forces withered and collapsed under its touch. Yet, somehow, the colony structures remained intact, as if the light could distinguish friend from foe. For 30 seconds, New Horizons' sky held a second sun. Then, gradually, the light receded, drawing back toward the Invictus. When it faded completely, Han could barely recognize the human ship. Its hull glowed red-hot. Sections had melted and reformed in twisted shapes. It hung in space, seemingly lifeless. "Get me life signs," Han demanded. "Detecting minimal power," the science officer reported. "But, yes, there are survivors aboard." Han closed his eyes briefly in relief. "Prepare medical teams and contact the colony. I want to know the status of the evacuation." The report came back quickly. Over 90% of the remaining colonists had reached safety. The Nox forces were completely destroyed, both in space and on the ground. Hours later, Han stood in the colony's medical center, watching as both Moran and human medical teams worked side by side, treating the injured. In one corner, Captain Kim sat on an examination table while a doctor treated burns along the captain's arms. Han approached slowly. "That was impressive technology." Kim looked up. "Sunfire is still experimental. We weren't sure it would work." "You risked your ship and crew on an untested weapon." "We risked everything to save lives," Kim corrected. "Isn't that what matters?" Han nodded slowly. "The Concordat will want this technology." A shadow crossed Kim's face. Sunfire isn't for sharing, Admiral. At least, not until we know it won't be misused. I understand, Han said, and found that he truly did. For what it's worth, I'll recommend to the Council that humans be recognized as equals, not subjects. Your actions today prove your worth as allies, not subordinates. Kim managed a tired smile. That would be a good start. Outside, the sky above New Horizon was clear again. But Han knew that nothing would ever be the same. The galaxy had changed today. Not just because of the Nox threat, but because humanity had revealed itself as a force unlike any the Concordat had encountered before. The great hall of the Concordat Council glowed with soft blue light. 100 representatives from across the galaxy sat in rising tiers, their faces solemn. At the center stood Admiral Han, his uniform still showing signs of battle. "The footage I am about to show is real," Han said, his voice steady. "It has not been altered in any way." The massive screen behind him came to life. It showed the Invictus moving to shield evacuation ships, taking devastating hits from Nox weapons. It showed human soldiers carrying injured colonists through burning buildings. It showed Captain Kim, bleeding from a head wound, directing defense operations while helping a small child find her parents. Murmurs filled the chamber as the Council watched humans fight and die for people they had never met, for a colony that wasn't their own. When the recording ended, the chamber was silent. High Counselor Min spoke first. "Admiral Han, are we to understand that these humans, a species unknown to us until recently, sacrificed their own lives to save our people?" "Yes, Counselor," Han replied. "They could have left at any time. Their ship, even damaged, was capable of escape. They chose to stay." "Why?" asked another counselor. "What did they gain from this action?" Han considered his answer carefully. "Nothing by our traditional metrics. No territory, no resources, no political advantage." He paused. "They did it because they believed it was right." A representative from a small furred species stood. "I would like to hear from those who were there." Han nodded and gestured to a group waiting near the entrance. 3 survivors from New Horizon Colony walked forward. One was an older woman who walked with a limp. "My name is Ju," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "I ran the power distribution center at New Horizon. When the Nox attacked, they targeted our main reactor first. I was trapped under fallen equipment when the humans found me." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of council members. "They could have fled," she testified. "Instead, they stood between us and death. The human captain told me, 'This is what we do.'" Other survivors shared similar stories. The council listened with growing unease. These accounts contradicted everything they believed about how species behaved, about the natural order of the galaxy where the strong dominated the weak. When the testimonies ended, Han spoke again. "I request that Captain Kim be allowed to address this council." Murmurs of surprise swept through the chamber. Never had a non-member species addressed the full council. Min hesitated, then nodded. "Bring in the human captain." Captain Kim entered the hall alone, wearing a clean uniform with simple insignia. The captain walked with a slight limp but stood tall before the council. "Captain Kim," Min said formally, "the Concordat Council recognizes your actions at New Horizon. You have earned the right to speak here." Kim looked around the chamber calmly. "Thank you, Counselor. I come with a message from Earth." "We are listening," Min replied. "Humanity has observed the Concordat for some time," Kim began. "We've seen great achievements, art, science, cooperation across vast distances. But we've also seen troubling things." The captain's voice remained respectful but firm. "Your classification system ranks species by their perceived value. Some gain full rights, while others serve without representation. This contradicts our most fundamental beliefs." A counselor from a tall, thin species interrupted. "Each species contributes according to its abilities. This is not cruelty. It is efficient governance." Kim nodded. "Perhaps, But efficiency without compassion becomes tyranny over time. What do humans propose instead? Min asked. A true alliance, Kim replied. Equal standing for all sentient species, equal voice in decisions that affect them. Laughter came from several council members. Impossible, called one. The lesser species lack the intellect for self-governance. Kim's expression hardened. We won't join a system that ranks life by birth, the captain declared firmly. Either all sentient beings have inherent worth, or none do. Humanity stands by this principle. And if we reject this demand, asked Min, then we will remain independent, Kim said simply. But know this, we will offer protection and alliance to any species that seeks it, regardless of their classification in your system. This statement caused an uproar. Several counselors rose in protest. Min raised a hand for silence. That sounds like interference in Concordat affairs, Captain. It is a statement of our values, Kim corrected. Nothing more. Before Min could respond, a communication officer rushed in. Counselors, urgent news. Delegations from 14 worlds are requesting immediate audience. Not now, Min said impatiently. They insist, Counselor. They say it cannot wait. The doors opened, and representatives from various lower-tier species entered. A small green-skinned being stepped forward as their spokesperson. We have watched the broadcasts from New Horizon, the being said. We have seen humans fight for those they do not know, ask nothing in return, and treat all life as worthy of protection. The being straightened to full height. We formally request human alliance and protection under their terms of equality. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Arguments broke out between counselors. Some demanded the immediate removal of the rebels, while others called for calm discussion. Admiral Han watched it all with a new understanding. The humans had done more than save a colony. They had changed the very foundation of galactic politics with a simple act of compassion. 6 months later, Han stood on a grassy hill on Earth. The sky above was a shade of blue he had never seen on any other world. Deeper, somehow more alive. Around him, trees moved in a gentle wind. In a park below, human children played. They ran, jumped, climbed, and laughed with an energy that seemed boundless. Among them were children from other species, the first cultural exchange program under the new alliance treaty. Han heard footsteps and turned to see Captain Kim approaching. Admiral, Kim greeted him. Enjoying your visit to Earth? Han nodded. It's beautiful, different than I expected. How so? Han gestured to the playing children. I expected a world that produced such warriors to be harsher, more focused on survival and strength. Kim smiled. That's what many species miss about humans. Our strength comes from our connection to others, not from dominance over them. They watched in silence as a human child helped a small Moran child climb a play structure, patiently showing where to place hands and feet. The alliance is growing, Han said. 28 species have joined already. And the Concordat. Changing, Han admitted. Slowly, but changing. Your terms were accepted because we had no choice. But now, many are seeing the benefits of true cooperation. A ball rolled toward them. A young human girl ran up to retrieve it, looking at Han with curiosity rather than fear. Hello, she said simply before running back to her game. Han watched her go, finally understanding what made humans different. It wasn't just their technology or their physical resilience or even their adaptability. It was their capacity to see worth in all life, to fight for strangers, to treat even enemies with respect. You know, Han said thoughtfully, when I was first assigned to find you, I thought I was hunting a threat. And now? Kim asked. Han looked at the children playing together, species that had never met now forming friendships that might last lifetimes. Now I understand what you told that colonist, Han replied. This is what we do. You protect, you build, you connect. The galaxy needed that more than we knew. As the sun began to set, painting Earth's sky in colors Han had never imagined. He realized that humanity's unpredictability, adaptability, and compassion made them not just fearsome warriors, but essential allies for the challenges that lay ahead. The greatest warship in human history had never been the Invictus. It had been the human heart, capable of both terrible fury and boundless kindness. And that Han now understood was the most powerful force in the galaxy.